There is a moment in season 7 of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson stands in a dark driveway, alone, and looks up at the stars. His mother just left. She was alive the whole time he thought she was dead. She is gone again. The show does not cut to something funny. It just holds on him standing there in the quiet, a grown man looking at the sky the way a child looks at the sky when they do not have words for what they are feeling. That shot lasts about 10 seconds. The writers put it there on purpose, and it tells you everything about what The Simpsons has actually been doing for 35 years underneath the jokes and the yellow skin and the donut gags. This is not a video about a cartoon family being silly in Springfield. This is a video about what that family is actually carrying and what it costs them and what they pass to each other without meaning to. Welcome to Yellow Fan. Let's get into it. Homer was broken before we met him. There is a scene in season 7 of The Simpsons that most people have seen and then immediately moved past because the show never stops long enough to let you sit in it. Homer Simpson, a grown man, discovers that his mother, the woman he believed had died when he was 9 years old, is actually alive. She has been alive this entire time. She faked her death. And Homer's first reaction, before the anger, before anything else, is this. He assumes it was his fault. He looks at the evidence in front of him, evidence that his mother chose to disappear from his life, and his immediate conclusion is that he must have been such a terrible son that she simply could not stay. That is not a punchline. That is what decades of unexplained abandonment does to a child who never got an explanation. Most people who watch The Simpsons know Homer as the guy who eats donuts, falls asleep at work, strangles his son for minor reasons, and stumbles through life in a way that is endlessly funny and endlessly charming. And that reading is not wrong. Homer is funny. Homer is charming. Homer is one of the most beloved characters in the history of television, and there are real, honest reasons for that. But the show, if you pay attention to it across all of its seasons, tells you something else about Homer that it never quite announces directly. It tells you that the man you are watching every week was formed by something that happened long before the first episode. It tells you that the laziness, the eating, the anger, the inability to hold on to anything for very long, the way he cycles through hobbies and jobs and obsessions without ever quite landing, all of it has a source. And the source is a childhood that broke something in him before he was old enough to know what was being broken. Start with the father. Abraham Simpson, known to everyone as Grandpa, is a man who is mostly played for comedy in the show. He lives in the Springfield retirement castle, which the show describes as a sad and lonely place. He tells long, rambling stories that nobody listens to. He is old and confused and periodically forgotten by the family. That is the surface version of Abe Simpson. The version underneath is harder to laugh at. Abe told Homer when Homer was around 9 years old that his mother had died at the movies. She had not died. She was alive. She was on the run from the law after she and a group of protesters had destroyed a germ warfare laboratory owned by Mr. Burns. She had become a political activist, a wanted criminal, and a fugitive, and rather than tell his young son the truth about any of that, Abe told him she was dead. The show eventually gives Abe's reason for this. He tells Mona, when they finally see each other again in the season 7 episode, it was either tell Homer she was dead or tell him his mother was a wanted criminal. Abe chose the lie that was easier to live with. He may not have been wrong, strictly speaking, but the lie had a cost, and Homer paid it every day for decades without knowing what he was paying for. And that is not the worst thing Abe said to his son. The show documents, across multiple episodes, a father who was controlling, emotionally distant, and at times genuinely cruel to Homer, in ways that the show frames as comedy, but that land differently if you are paying attention. Abe told Homer to his face, "You are dumb as a mule and twice as ugly. If a stranger offers you a ride, take it." That is not a hard man being blunt. That is a father telling his child he is worthless and disposable in the same sentence. And in the season 6 episode where Abe reveals to Homer that his birth was an accident, the show notes that this causes Homer years of pent-up anger to finally surface. Homer has been carrying this. He has just not been allowed to put it down. Now add the mother. Mona Simpson is not a villain. The show is very careful about that. She is played with real warmth, voiced by Glenn Close, and her love for Homer is genuine and visible every time they are together. But love, the show keeps showing you, is not the same thing as being there. Mona left when Homer was young. She left because she had to, because her life as a fugitive made staying impossible. She missed decades. She sent care packages that were never delivered because Homer forgot to tip the letter carrier at Christmas. She carried photographs. She thought about him constantly. Homer never knew any of that. What Homer knew was that his mother was gone, and then, for years, that she was dead. And when the care packages turn up at the post office in season 7, when the clerk drops a mailbag full of undelivered letters on the counter, and Mona has to prove to Homer that she really did try to reach him, there is a moment in that scene that the show plays quietly and then moves past. Homer has spent years believing he was not worth coming back for. The packages do not fix that. They just change the specific shape of the wound. The season 19 episode where Mona dies is even harder, for a specific reason that is easy to miss. Homer's last words to his mother before she passes away are words of anger. She had manipulated him into a scheme against Mr. Burns, using him without telling him what she was really doing, and Homer was furious. He never got to apologize. He never got to say anything different. The episode after her death is built entirely around Homer trying to find a way to make peace with something he can no longer change. Now look at what all of this produces. The show, through a detail buried in the season 19 episode recap, makes something explicit that the rest of the series only implies. Mona's neglect, the years she spent going to protests instead of being with her son, led Homer to treat food as a mother figure. When he was young and she was absent, food was consistent. Food was always there. Food did not disappear. Food did not go on the run from the federal government. And so Homer, as an adult, eats the way he does not because he is lazy or thoughtless, but because he is still, at some level, that child filling a hole that was never filled properly. The eating is not a character flaw. It is a coping mechanism that has been running so long it has become invisible, even to him. This matters because the show keeps giving you pieces of it and then not connecting them, as if it trusts you to do that yourself. The way Homer drinks, the way he cycles through new passions and then drops them when they get difficult, the way he is capable of genuine love for his family, but keeps a kind of ceiling on how present he can be. The way he reacts to criticism, not with measured response, but with impulsive rage or total shutdown. None of these things exist in isolation. They are all part of the same picture of a man who was not given the tools to be any different, and who has been improvising his entire adult life with whatever was left over. There is also the matter of what the Simpsons household produces when that unprocessed damage meets the daily stress of a family with 3 children, no money, and a job at a nuclear power plant that Homer is visibly unqualified for. By the time Homer becomes a father, he is replicating the patterns he was raised with, not because he wants to, not because he is a bad person, but because those are the only patterns he has. He strangles Bart with his hands. Abe attacked Homer with words. The method is different. The underlying dynamic, a parent who cannot regulate their own frustration, taking it out on a child, is the same. And yet Homer is not Abe. The show is careful about this too. Homer loves his children in ways that Abe never visibly loved Homer. The season 5 episode that shows the photo collage Homer keeps at his workstation, the famous moment where it is revealed that he has covered the poster that read, "Do not forget, you are here forever," with photos of Maggie until it reads, "Do it for her," is real, and it is genuine, and it is one of the most honest things the show has ever done. Homer chose to stay. Homer chose to be present. Homer chose the family over the easier life. He is not his father, but choosing to stay is not the same as arriving healed. It is not the same as having worked through what happened to you. You can love your children completely and still pass things on to them that you were never aware you were carrying. You can be a better father than the one you had and still be leaving marks. This is the thing the show understands about Homer Simpson that most people who watch it do not consciously register, but almost certainly feel. He is not stupid. He is damaged. There is a difference between a man who never had the capacity to be anything else and a man who had the capacity taken from him before he understood what was happening. Homer is the second kind. The show built him that way from the beginning. It just hid the blueprints inside the comedy where they were easier to carry. The last thing to say about this, before moving forward, is about that scene at the end of Mother Simpson. Homer has just said goodbye to his mother again. She is in a van, disappearing into the night, and he cannot follow her. He stands outside his house in the dark. The camera holds on him for a long moment. He looks up at the stars. The scene does not have a punchline. The show does not cut to something funny. It just lets Homer stand there in the dark, a man in his 30s, looking up at the sky the way a child looks at a night sky when they do not know what else to do with what they are feeling. The writers made this choice at the script table, and then the director, David Silverman, added the final image because the scene felt too true to break with a joke. Nobody at the funeral scene of Frank Grimes, one season later, looks at Homer the way the camera looks at him in that moment. Nobody in Springfield thinks about what made Homer the way he is, but the show thought about it in Season 7 in the quiet of a starlit driveway, and it gave Homer the dignity of standing in his own grief without asking anyone to laugh at him. Quote _0 __. That grief goes somewhere. It goes into the walls of the house on Evergreen Terrace. It goes into the way Homer holds his children, and the way he lets them down, and the way he keeps showing up anyway. It goes, as we are about to see, directly into the boy who grew up in that house, and became the family member the show jokes about most, and understands least. Section 2. Homer strangling Bart is not a joke. There is a moment in the very first episode of The Simpsons that almost nobody remembers, because it happens during the end credits, and because by the time you hear it, you are already laughing at something else. The family is sitting together singing Christmas carols. Bart and Lisa keep interrupting with childish remarks. Homer gets more and more frustrated, and then Bart interrupts one more time, and there is a sound, off-screen, not shown, of Homer's hands finding his son's throat. The strangling begins. Homer yells his usual line. The credits roll. That is how the show introduced the idea of a father physically attacking his child, not as a dark reveal, not as a moment the audience was meant to be troubled by, as a way to end the first episode on a laugh. What followed, across the next 35 years, was one of the longest-running physical abuse gags in the history of American television. Homer strangled Bart for mispronouncing Daddy as a baby. He strangled him for sending a letter to Mr. Burns, a letter that Homer himself helped write. He strangled him for minor reasons, for no reasons, for reasons the show does not even bother to establish before Homer's hands are already moving. The show has Lenny confirm, in the Season 8 episode Homer's Enemy, that Homer has had 316 near-death experiences at the nuclear plant by that point in the series. The accumulation of violence in Homer's life, at work and at home, is treated as a running number, a statistic, something to be tallied and laughed at. Child Protective Services visits the Simpson house exactly once across the entire run of the show. That visit happens in the Season 7 episode Home Sweet Home Dumb Diddly Doodly. The reason CPS comes is not the strangling. The reason is unrelated to Homer's hands around his son's throat, which has been happening regularly since the first episode. CPS shows up for a different reason entirely, investigates the house, And the strangling, ongoing, documented, witnessed by everyone in Springfield at various points, is simply not the issue anyone is there to address. That detail is either the show's darkest joke or the most honest thing it has ever admitted about how these situations work in the real world. Probably both. Here is what makes this more complicated than a simple argument about a cartoon being irresponsible. The show is not unaware of what it is doing. The Simpsons is one of the most self-aware programs ever made for television, and the writers, at various points across the series, demonstrate clearly that they understand the difference between Bart being annoyed by Homer and Bart being genuinely hurt by him. The show knows these are not the same thing. It just usually and deliberately chooses to present them as the same thing. The moments where it does not make that choice are the ones that stay with you. Think about what the strangling actually is, structurally, as a recurring moment. Homer loses control of his temper. His hands go to his son's throat. Bart's eyes bulge. The moment plays as exaggerated cartoon violence, Looney Tunes energy, consequence-free, reset before the next scene. The laugh comes from the recognition that this is what frustration looks like taken to its logical extreme, blown past the point of reality into absurdity. That is how it works when it works. But Bart does not always bounce back clean, and the show, when it wants to tell you something true about this family, shows you what the accumulation actually looks like underneath the cartoon surface. The episode Lisa's Sax in Season 9 does something the show rarely does. It goes back. It shows you Bart before the pranks, before the graffiti, before the reputation as Springfield's most reliably troublesome child. It shows you Bart in his early years, in a classroom, with a teacher, and what that teacher does to Bart, the belittling, the verbal attacks, the steady erosion of a small child who came in not yet knowing what he was supposed to be, is established in that episode as the reason Bart became the person everyone in Springfield assumes he always was. The teacher made the version of Bart the world knows. The world then punished that version, and nobody ever went back to ask what made the version before. Homer's role in this is not the teacher's role, but it is not clean either. The strangling is the most visible thing, but the show documents something quieter and more consistent alongside the physical stuff. Homer is a father who cannot see his son's potential and will not pretend to. He talks down to his children. He misses the things they are actually good at and gravitates toward what is easy to mock or dismiss. He is capable of genuine warmth. The show insists on this, and it is real, but the warmth coexists with a dismissiveness that the show never fully addresses. Bart sometimes bonds with Ned Flanders the way children bond with the adult who actually pays attention to them, and the show plays this as a running joke about Homer being a bad neighbor. The thing underneath, that his son goes looking for a father figure next door because something is missing at home, does not get a punchline. Bart's pranks are documented throughout the series as cries for attention. That phrase is used casually and often, and because it is used casually and often, it loses its weight. But hold on to it for a moment. A child who acts out to get a parent to notice him is a child who has tried the other way and found it does not work. The mischief is communication. It is Bart saying, in the only language that reliably gets a response, that something is wrong, and the response he reliably gets is Homer's hands on his throat, which means the communication loop is broken in the worst possible way. The thing that was meant to get attention gets the wrong kind of attention, which confirms what Bart already suspected, which makes the acting out worse, which makes Homer angrier, which closes the loop tighter. The show is aware of this. There is a moment, documented in the broader character analysis of Bart, where Homer and Marge administer an actual sociopath test on their son. They are genuinely unsure whether their child is incapable of feeling empathy or just behaving as though he is. They send him to a facility, and while he is there, Bart says something the show almost never lets him say without wrapping it in comedy. He says he truly does not want to hurt people. He says it plainly, without a joke attached, without Bart's usual armor of performed indifference. The facility and the people who run it take him at his word. The show moves on before you can think too carefully about what just happened. What just happened is that a 10-year-old told the truth about himself in a room full of people who were positioned to actually hear it, and then went home to a house where the dynamic that produced the behavior in the first place was still waiting for him. The season 12 episode where the entire town of Springfield abuses Bart over a baseball game takes this to its extreme. The town mocks him. They keep mocking him when he is driven to attempt suicide. They keep mocking him after he falls into a coma. The only person who stops it is Marge, who shames the entire town for what they are doing. This episode is in the comedy drama zone the show occasionally finds, where something is presented with enough exaggeration to count as satire, but the underlying content is not exaggerated at all. A community so thoroughly decided about a child that they celebrate when he harms himself is not a cartoon scenario. It happens. It happened before this episode aired. The show pointed at it and then buried it under enough Springfield absurdity that you could laugh and not have to sit with what you had just watched. In the Simpsons movie, Bart drinks an entire mini bottle of whiskey to deal with emotional pain. He is 10 years old. He is doing what he has watched Homer do his entire life. He is doing what the adults around him have always done when the feelings get too large to carry sober. He does it the way children do everything, by copying the people who raise them, without the context that would tell him what he is actually copying. There is a small but important piece of documentation in the show's character history for Bart. He is described as a polyglot. He can speak French, Japanese, Cantonese, and Latin. Each of these languages appears in an episode where Bart has been placed in an extreme situation, living with abusive French winemakers, working as a courier in China, being thrown in jail in Japan with Homer. The show treats each of these episodes as adventure stories. What they actually describe is a 10-year-old who has been in enough genuinely dangerous situations to pick up a new language each time. That is not an adventure. That is a child who keeps ending up in circumstances no child should be in, developing survival skills he should not need, and returning home to a house where nobody fully registers what he went through. Marge knows. This needs to be said clearly, because the show is careful to show it. Marge is not blind to what Homer does. She intervenes. She advocates for Bart. She is the parent in the house who can see him clearly and wants to protect him. But Marge's protection has a ceiling, and the show builds that ceiling deliberately. She enables the overall system even while pushing back against its worst moments. She fixes what she can fix and works around what she cannot. And in a house where Homer's rages have been running since before Bart could walk, what she cannot fix is a very large category. The strangling gag has been in the show so long that it is calcified into part of the brand. It appears on merchandise, it gets referenced in the opening sequence. It has been so thoroughly absorbed into the fabric of what The Simpsons is that most viewers stopped clocking it as anything other than a character beat decades ago. That normalization is itself worth looking at. Something that would be immediately identified as a serious problem in any realistic depiction of family life has been made through repetition and cartoon framing into a signature. Into something you associate with the show the way you associate the yellow skin or the couch gag or the chalkboard. It is furniture now, and furniture does not get examined. But Bart lives in that house, not as furniture, not as a recurring gag, as a child who has grown up inside a dynamic that the show itself, in its most honest moments, acknowledges is damaging. The episode where Bart bonds with a substitute father figure, the episode where he drinks whiskey at 10, the episode where an entire town cheers for his death over a baseball game, the episode where his kindergarten teacher is identified as the source of everything that went wrong in his childhood, the sociopath test, the coma. All of these exist in the same show as the strangling gag. They are not separate from it. They are the other side of it. Here is what the show is doing when you put all of this together. It is running 2 tracks simultaneously and trusting the viewer to notice both without being told to look. Track 1 is Homer and Bart as a comedy duo, the exasperated father and the chaotic son, a classic setup, endlessly renewable, safe enough to print on a t-shirt. Track 2 is a portrait of what that dynamic looks like to the child on the receiving end of it, drawn carefully enough across 35 years of episodes that it cannot be accidental. Homer loves Bart. The show makes this clear over and over. The camping trips, the moments of genuine connection, the episodes where Homer shows up for his son in ways that matter. The love is real. But love, the show keeps returning to this idea in different forms, is not a solution. It coexists with the damage. It always has. In the Simpson family, love and harm have been sharing the same rooms, the same couch, the same dinner table for as long as the show has existed. And the child who absorbs that combination grows up believing, at some level, that this is what love looks like, that this is its texture, that the hands around the throat and the arm around the shoulder come from the same place, because in this house they do. What the strangling actually is, in the end, is a piece of intergenerational information being passed between 2 people who did not ask to carry it. Abe passed something to Homer. Homer is passing something to Bart. The shape of it has changed. Words became hands, distance became contact, but the underlying content, which is a parent whose pain is too large to contain, and a child who is too small to do anything but absorb it, is the same. The show has been telling you this since the closing credits of its very first episode. You just have to be willing to hear it after you stop laughing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Bart's story does not exist in isolation inside this family. He takes the physical weight of what Homer cannot process. His sister absorbs something different, quieter, and in some ways darker. She absorbs the neglect, and the show has been documenting what that does to a child, with more honesty than almost any other program on television since episode 6. Section 3. Lisa Simpson has been clinically depressed since episode 6. The 6th episode of The Simpsons ever made is not about Homer getting a new job. It is not about Bart pulling a prank. It is not about Springfield doing something ridiculous that the family has to respond to. It is about an 8-year-old girl who wakes up one morning and cannot explain why she feels the way she feels, and the show does not try to explain it for her. It just shows you the feeling. It lets it sit there. And then, at the end, it does not fix it. That episode is called Moaning Lisa. It aired on February 11th, 1990. The Simpsons had been a show for less than 2 months. The idea for it came from James L. Brooks, one of the show's producers, who pitched a simple and somewhat frightening premise to the writing staff. Do an episode where Lisa is sad, and she does not know why. The writers, Al Jean and Mike Reiss, were initially not sure a depression episode about an 8-year-old would work on a comedy show. They were unsure audiences would accept it. They wrote it anyway. And what they produced, in 1990, for a network cartoon that had not yet figured out what it fully was something that most prestige television still struggles to do with adult characters. It showed a child in genuine emotional pain without a clean resolution. The episode begins with Lisa standing at the bathroom mirror, not doing anything, just looking at herself. Homer is pounding on the door waiting for his turn, and Lisa is standing there in the quiet, looking at her own reflection with an expression the show does not explain and does not need to. At breakfast, Marge has 2 cupcakes for 3 people. Lisa does not take one. She is not being polite. She is depressed enough that a cupcake does not register as something worth having. The show shows you this without comment. It just lets that detail sit there and does its work. Lisa gets in trouble at school for improvising during band practice instead of playing what she is supposed to play. She refuses to participate in a food fight at lunch. She cannot bring herself to engage in gym class. These are not acts of rebellion. They are the specific behaviors of a child for whom the ordinary texture of a day has become too heavy to move through with any energy. The show is describing depression in a child, using those exact behaviors in 1990, and it is doing it accurately enough that child psychologists have pointed to this episode as a realistic depiction of what childhood depression actually looks like. At night, Lisa hears music coming through her window. She goes outside and finds a man playing saxophone in the street. His name is Bleeding Gums Murphy. He plays the blues. He does not tell her to cheer up. He does not tell her that things get better or that she has so much to be grateful for. He just plays music with her, and something about that, being met in the feeling instead of being pulled away from it, gives Lisa a kind of relief that nothing else in the episode provides. They play the blues together. The feeling does not go away, but she is less alone in it. Marge, watching all of this, tries to help the way she knows how. She takes Lisa to school, and on the drive there, she gives her daughter advice. The advice is this: take all your bad feelings and push them down, past your knees, until you are almost walking on them. Smile. Fit in. Do not let people see what is actually going on inside you. Marge is not being cruel. She is passing on the only tool she has, which is the tool her own mother gave her, which is the tool her mother's mother probably gave her before that. Suppress, present, perform. And then Marge watches what happens when Lisa follows that advice. She watches her daughter fake smile her way through her school day. She watches boys mock Lisa while Lisa keeps smiling. She watches her daughter disappear behind a performance of being okay. And something in Marge recognizes what she is seeing, because she has been doing the same thing her entire adult life. The show gives Marge a moment of genuine clarity here that it does not give her often. She does a tire-squealing U-turn, pulls Lisa out of school, and takes back what she said. She tells Lisa it is okay to be sad. She tells her to always be herself, whatever that costs. She tells her she will always have her family. It is one of the most tender moments in the show's history. It is also, and the show does not say this out loud, but it is there if you are watching carefully, the moment where Marge recognizes that the advice she has spent her whole life following has been damaging her the same way it was about to damage her daughter. But moaning Lisa is only the beginning of the document. The show returns to Lisa's mental state again and again across its run, not as a one-time special episode theme, but as a continuous thread. Because the writers understood from the beginning that a child like Lisa, extraordinarily intelligent, emotionally perceptive, surrounded by people who cannot fully meet her at the level she is operating on, was not going to experience her pain as a single episode with a resolution. She was going to carry it. It was going to be a condition, not a story. In the season 20 episode, The Good, the Sad, and the Drugly, Lisa is assigned a school report about what Springfield will look like 50 years in the future. She does the research. She finds articles about war, famine, poverty, and environmental disaster, and she breaks. She gives a presentation to her class that is so dark and specific in its picture of the future that one of her classmates jumps out of the window screaming. Homer and Marge take her to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist prescribes her what the show calls ignore-it-all, happy pills. Lisa takes the first pill and the world immediately becomes soft and bright. She sees everything as smiley faces. Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World plays in her head. She is happy in the way that only a person who has been medicated into disconnection from reality can be happy, completely, effortlessly, and without any relationship to what is actually happening around her. She almost kisses a running fan that Maggie is holding because she cannot see it as what it is. Marge takes her off the medication. The resolution of this episode is not Lisa being cured. It is not Lisa finding peace. It is Lisa choosing to face her pain rather than chemically escape it, knowing the pain is still there and is not going anywhere. The episode ends with her giving Bart advice about his own problems. She is 8 years old, still, and she is talking about the necessity of sitting with grief rather than running from it. The show built that understanding into an 8-year-old because it had spent 20 seasons establishing that this particular 8-year-old has had to develop that understanding out of necessity. Then there is the season 16 episode Sleeping with the Enemy, in which Lisa develops what the show clearly frames as an eating disorder. She becomes convinced that her body is wrong, that her size is something to be ashamed of. The episode does not resolve cleanly. It does not end with Lisa loving herself and everyone learning a lesson. It ends with Lisa acknowledging that she still struggles with it and that the struggle might last for years. That is not a sitcom ending. That is an honest one. What is happening across all of these episodes, taken together, is a portrait that the show has been constructing since 1990 of a child whose pain is real, documented, recurring, and not going away. The depression in Moaning Lisa is the same depression that resurfaces in The Good, the Sad, and the Drugly. The body image pain in Sleeping with the Enemy comes from the same place as the isolation and loneliness that runs through every episode where Lisa tries to find a friend and loses them. These are not separate storylines. They are the same storyline, continuing across 35 years, never resolved, never reset. The show does something unusual with Lisa's pain, which is that it respects it. It does not ask the viewer to find her sad feelings funny. It does not undercut her with a punchline at the moment when she is most vulnerable. When Homer, in Moaning Lisa, is asked by Marge to go talk to Lisa about how she is feeling, Homer goes to Lisa's room, sits down, and almost immediately starts talking about himself. The show knows this is what Homer will do. It does not pretend otherwise. But what it also does is show Homer trying, failing, but trying, and then Marge stepping in to do the thing Homer cannot do, which is actually see their daughter. Lisa's intelligence is central to all of this in a way that the show understands and that most analyses of her character miss. Her IQ is confirmed at various points in the series as being between 156 and 167, depending on the episode. She is the youngest member of the Springfield chapter of Mensa. She taught herself to change her own diaper as a baby. She is, by every measure the show provides, operating at a level that nobody in her immediate environment can match. And that is not freedom. That is its own kind of trap. The show makes this explicit in multiple episodes. She cannot find friends her age who can keep up with her. The ones who seem to understand her are always temporary. Substitute teachers, visiting characters, people who appear for one episode and then disappear into Springfield's revolving door of guest appearances. The show keeps giving her connection and then taking it back, not because the writers are being cruel, but because they are being honest about what it is like to be the smartest person in every room and to know, at 8 years old, that this is the room you are going to be in forever. There is an episode called Lisa the Simpson in Season 9, where Lisa becomes convinced she has inherited a genetic flaw that runs through the male side of the Simpson family, a flaw that causes intelligence to decline with age. She watches herself lose things. She forgets her locker combination. She loses her saxophone technique. She cannot solve a puzzle that Bart solves easily. She has a nightmare about marrying Ralph Wiggum and living a diminished life surrounded by children who have inherited her diminished mind. The nightmare is played partly for comedy. Lisa's terror in it is not comedy. The thing she is afraid of losing is the only thing that has ever made her feel like herself, and the idea of losing it is more frightening to her than almost anything else the show has put her through. What the show has been building, from episode 6 onward, is not a character who is smart and sad in a charming, quirky way. It is a character who is experiencing ongoing depression depression, social isolation, body image pain, and a fear of her own future that is grounded in her accurate understanding of the world she lives in. She is sad because the things that make her sad are real. Springfield is not going to improve in 50 years. The people around her are not going to suddenly become capable of meeting her where she is. Her family loves her and cannot fully understand her, and those two things are going to coexist for as long as she lives in that house. The show told you all of this in 1990. It told you before anyone was sure it could work, before anyone was sure a network cartoon could carry that kind of emotional weight without losing its audience. It told you in the form of a small girl standing at a bathroom mirror in the morning, not doing anything, just looking, in a way that anyone who has ever felt that particular heaviness immediately recognizes. James L. Brooks wanted an episode where Lisa was sad and did not know why. What the writers produced was something that turned out to be much bigger than a single episode. It turned out to be the first chapter of the most honest, ongoing portrait of a child's interior life that television comedy has ever produced. And it has been running, without pause, without resolution, since February of 1990. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The sadness is real. The intelligence is real. The isolation is real. And as the show is about to show you, the intelligence does not protect her from the isolation. It is, in many ways, the cause of it. Because being the smartest person in the room means you can see exactly what is happening to you, and seeing it clearly does not mean you can find the door. Section 4. The Intelligence Trap. Lisa is probably never getting out of Springfield. There is an episode in Season 9 called Lisa the Simpson. In it, Lisa becomes convinced she is losing her intelligence. She cannot solve a brain teaser that Bart solves easily. She forgets her locker combination. She loses her saxophone technique. She goes to Grandpa and tells him what is happening, and Grandpa confirms her worst fear. He tells her that every male Simpson starts out smart and then gets dumber as they age. It is in the genes. It is inevitable. It is coming for her, too. Lisa has a nightmare that night. She is grown up. She is married to Ralph Wiggum. She is surrounded by children who have inherited her diminished mind. She wakes up from the nightmare in a panic. The episode eventually provides a small rescue. It turns out the gene only affects the male Simpsons, not the females, and Lisa discovers this through a gathering of female Simpson relatives who are all sharp and accomplished. The crisis is resolved. Lisa is going to be okay. Her intelligence is not going anywhere. But here is the thing the episode cannot resolve, and does not try to. Lisa keeping her intelligence does not mean she gets to leave Springfield. It does not mean she gets to be somewhere that matches what she is capable of. It does not mean the loneliness goes away, or the friends stop disappearing, or the family suddenly becomes able to understand her at the level she needs to be understood. The relief at the end of Lisa the Simpson is real, and it changes almost nothing about the actual shape of Lisa's life. Lisa Simpson has an IQ confirmed across multiple episodes as somewhere between 156 and 167. She is the youngest member of the Springfield chapter of Mensa. She taught herself to change her own diaper as an infant. She builds a perpetual motion machine during a teacher's strike in Season 6 in the episode The PTA Disbands, because she is so desperate for academic challenge that the absence of school sends her into withdrawal. She demands that Marge grade her on things. She needs the structure of being tested and praised the way other children need food and sleep. The show plays this as a quirk. It is not a quirk. It is a child whose entire sense of self is built on the one thing she has that nobody around her can take from her, her mind, and who falls apart the moment that thing is threatened or removed. She is 8 years old, and she is operating this way. She has been 8 years old for over 35 years. That last part is important. The show's structure means that Lisa cannot age, she cannot graduate, she cannot go to a better school in a different city. She cannot find the community she is always searching for and stay in it. The floating timeline that keeps Bart 10 and Maggie a baby also keeps Lisa locked in second grade at Springfield Elementary forever, surrounded by the same classmates who do not understand her, the same teachers who do not know what to do with her, the same family who loves her without being able to meet her. This is not a production accident. It is the premise. And taken seriously, it means that everything Lisa is searching for, real connection, real intellectual companionship, an environment that can actually hold what she is structurally impossible for her to find. The show put her in a cage made out of the format itself. The friends are the clearest evidence of this. In Season 2, in the episode Lisa's Substitute, a substitute teacher named Mr. Bergstrom arrives at Springfield Elementary. He is voiced by Dustin Hoffman, who chose to be credited under the fake name Sam Edick, rather than have his real name attached to a cartoon. Mr. Bergstrom is unlike any adult Lisa has encountered in her regular life. He recognizes her. He sees her intelligence not as a problem to be managed, but as something genuinely worth engaging with. He teaches with energy and curiosity, and a belief that the students in front of him are worth taking seriously. For Lisa, who has spent her entire school life being tolerated rather than taught, this is overwhelming. She falls for the idea of him completely. Not in a romantic way, she is 8, but in the way a person who has been starving falls for the first real meal. She follows him around. She lights up in his class. She becomes, for the first time in the show's run, a version of herself that is not straining against her environment. And then he leaves. He is a substitute. He was only ever temporary. Before he goes, he writes something on a piece of paper and hands it to Lisa. It says, "You are Lisa Simpson." That is the whole message. You are enough. You do not need me to tell you that you are something, because you already are something. He gets on a bus and goes. Lisa rides home in silence. She holds the bus token he gave her. The episode does not give her a speech about how she will be okay. It does not cut to something funny. It just holds on her face in the quiet of the bus, and a viewer watching that face sees a child who has just been shown, briefly, what it feels like to be truly understood by another person, and who is now sitting with the knowledge that the person who provided that feeling is gone and is not coming back. Mr. Bergstrom never returns. That is canon. That is what the show chose to do with the character who came closest to genuinely helping Lisa. It sent him away and kept him gone. This is a pattern, not an exception. The show identifies it directly in its treatment of Lisa's social life across seasons. In several episodes, The Simpsons makes the point plainly that Lisa struggles to find friends who can keep up with her, and that the ones she does find always disappear one way or another. This is not bad luck written into isolated episodes. It is a feature of who Lisa is and where she lives. Springfield does not produce people like Lisa. It produces people who are comfortable with Springfield. Lisa is not comfortable with Springfield. She has never been comfortable with Springfield. She is just stuck there. Her family loves her and cannot reach her. This is the specific texture of Lisa's loneliness, and it is different from just being alone. Homer tries. The show documents Homer trying to connect with Lisa in multiple episodes and falling short not because he does not care, but because he genuinely does not have the tools. He is not operating at her level, and he knows it. And rather than sit in the discomfort of that gap, he often fills it with humor or changes the subject or redirects to something he can handle. Marge gets closer. Marge is the parent who sees Lisa most clearly, but even Marge, in moaning Lisa, gives her daughter the wrong advice first, the advice to suppress and perform before correcting herself. Bart and Lisa have a specific dynamic that the show handles with more care than it is usually given credit for. Bart loves his sister. This is documented. He shows it in a roundabout way almost always, because showing it directly would require a kind of emotional openness that Bart's upbringing has not equipped him for. But when Lisa is genuinely in trouble, Bart shows up. The problem is that Bart operates in the physical, practical world of pranks and schemes, and what Lisa needs most of the time is someone to sit in the world of ideas with her. Bart cannot do that. He does not have the tools either. So he loves her from the outside of what she actually needs, and that is better than nothing, but it is still a version of alone. In season 34, during the episode The Very Hungry Caterpillars, a lockdown in Springfield pushes Lisa's anxiety to a breaking point. The isolation of being unable to go anywhere or see anyone collapses whatever coping structures she had built around her regular life. The episode is the latest in a long line of evidence that Lisa's mental health is not a stable thing being periodically disrupted by events. It is a thing that requires constant active maintenance, and when the conditions that allow that maintenance are removed, the whole structure comes down fast. She is always managing. The intelligence, the music, the activism, the causes she throws herself into, these are not just character traits. They are the tools she uses to stay functional inside an environment that was not built for her. Remove any one of them and you see what is underneath. The show has shown you what is underneath multiple times. It is the girl from episode 6, standing at the bathroom mirror, not doing anything, just looking. There is a particular cruelty in the setup that the show seems aware of but cannot change without dismantling itself. Lisa can see her situation clearly. She has an IQ between 156 and 167. She understands exactly what Springfield is, and exactly what it offers her, and exactly what it does not. She is not confused about any of this. She knows. And knowing does not help. Knowing what your cage is made of does not open the door. It just means you spend more time looking at the bars with full understanding of what they are and why they are there. The show will eventually, in flash-forward episodes, show you versions of adult Lisa who escaped, who became president, who made something of herself. Those futures exist in the show's universe, but they are always far away and always conditional, always separated from the present by decades of more Springfield, more isolation, more managing. The child in the present tense of the show has to get through all of that first. And the show does not skip that part. It keeps her in it. It keeps her 8 years old and in second grade, and sitting next to classmates who do not understand her, and going home to a family who loves her without being able to reach her. That is the intelligence trap. You are smart enough to see everything. You are not free enough to change any of it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What is happening to Lisa from the outside is loneliness and isolation. What is happening to the family from the outside, from the perspective of someone who has to live and work alongside it, is something darker and stranger. Because the Simpson family does not just harm itself, it exists in a world, and that world has people in it, and some of those people bump up against the way this family operates and do not survive the collision. Section 5. What Homer's enemy actually proves about the Simpson family. There is a man named Frank Grimes who appears in exactly one episode of The Simpsons. He dies at the end of it, and the way he dies, and the way the show treats his death, and the way the people at his funeral behave while his coffin is being lowered into the ground, adds up to the most uncomfortable thing the show has ever said about the Simpson family and the world they live in. The episode is called Homer's Enemy. It aired in Season 8 in 1997. It was written by John Swartzwelder and directed by Jim Reardon. The writers, by their own admission, knew exactly what they were doing. Executive producer Josh Weinstein said afterward that Frank Grimes said things that needed to be said, and that once those things were said, the show needed to destroy the person who said them. He added that the writers took a kind of dark satisfaction in watching Grimes fall. He was too righteous, Weinstein said. That somehow made his destruction more satisfying. Read that again slowly. The people who made the show destroyed a character they agreed was correct because being correct was not enough to survive in Springfield. Here is who Frank Grimes was before the episode begins. He was abandoned by his parents at 4 years old. He spent his childhood working as a delivery boy, carrying gifts to children from wealthy and loving families. Children who had what he did not have and who would never know his name. On his 18th birthday, he was severely injured in a silo explosion. Nobody explains how the silo exploded. It just exploded, because that is the kind of life Frank Grimes had. He recovered. He put himself through school. He earned a degree in nuclear physics through his own effort, without anyone helping him, without a safety net of any kind. He was living in a single room above a bowling alley and below another bowling alley when the episode begins. He had a second job working nights at a foundry, on top of his day job at the plant. Mr. Burns sees a news report about Grimes and is impressed enough to offer him a senior position at the Springfield nuclear power plant. Then Burns sees a news report about a heroic dog and forgets Grimes entirely. Grimes gets assigned to Sector 7G instead. He sits down next to Homer Simpson. What Grimes observes from that seat is this. Homer Simpson, his new co-worker, is the safety inspector at a nuclear power plant. He sleeps on the job. He is negligent in ways that are immediately visible to anyone paying attention. He has caused the number of accidents at the plant to double and the number of full meltdowns to triple every single year since he took the position. He has never been fired for any of this. He has never been formally disciplined for any of this. He once nearly drank sulfuric acid and responded to being told what it was with laughter rather than concern. The show documents all of these details across multiple episodes. The episode Homer's Enemy brings them together in one place and asks a simple question through Frank Grimes. How is this man still here? Lenny and Carl give Grimes the answer. It is not an official answer, not a policy or a statement from management. It is just, do not question it. Everyone understands that Homer should not be here. Everyone has made peace with that understanding. The way to survive in Springfield is to accept the things that make no sense and build your life around the gaps. Grimes cannot do this. Not because he is a bad person, because he has spent his entire life being told that hard work is how you earn things. He delivered toys to rich children. He survived a silo explosion. He earned his degree and found his way into this building through nothing but effort. And the man sitting next to him, who has done none of those things and shown none of that effort, has a life that Grimes would have no realistic path to achieving, even if he spent another 30 years trying. Homer has a house. Homer has a beautiful wife. Homer has 3 children. Homer has 2 cars. Homer can afford to serve lobster for dinner when he wants to impress a guest. Homer has been an astronaut. Homer won a Grammy. Homer toured with the Smashing Pumpkins. Homer was friends with a former president of the United States. All of this is documented in the episode, confirmed by Homer's own home, which Grimes tours in growing disbelief. Homer did not earn any of it in the way Grimes understands earning. Homer stumbled into it. Homer was carried through it by a combination of luck, the goodwill of people who like him despite his failings, and the specific logic of a universe that is built around keeping him comfortable. Grimes sees all of this and it breaks something in him. not because he is envious in a petty way. Because he has structured his entire understanding of how life works around the idea that effort produces reward, and Homer is proof that this idea is wrong. Grimes decides to expose Homer. He tricks Homer into entering a contest to design a nuclear power plant, removing the parts of the flyer that show it is a contest for children. Homer enters without knowing it is for children. He builds a model. He presents it alongside the actual children who were supposed to be in the contest. And then, in the moment Grimes has been building toward, the moment where everyone is supposed to finally see Homer as Grimes sees him, Homer wins. The crowd cheers. Mr. Burns gives Homer the trophy. Everyone applauds. Nobody finds it strange. Grimes has a breakdown. He runs through the plant doing impressions of Homer, acting the way Homer acts, grabbing things without safety equipment, touching things he should not touch. He grabs a pair of high-voltage wires without gloves. He is killed instantly. At the funeral, Homer falls asleep in the pew. He begins talking in his sleep, saying something that makes Reverend Lovejoy and the other mourners laugh out loud. The laughter happens while Grimes's coffin is being lowered into the ground. The episode ends there. The writers of The Simpsons understood that this ending was cruel. They did it anyway, and their explanation, that Grimes needed to be destroyed because he was too righteous, is itself a confession about what the show is protecting. Grimes was right about everything he said about Homer. The show agrees with him. The show just cannot allow someone who is right about Homer to survive making that case, because if they survive and the case stands, then the audience has to sit with the actual implications of what Homer is and what his family costs the world around them. Those implications are not comfortable. Homer is the safety inspector at a nuclear power plant. He sleeps at work. He has caused accidents and meltdowns every year he has held the position. The number has been climbing since he started. Springfield is a real town in the world of the show, with real residents, and the person responsible for making sure their nuclear plant does not kill them is Homer Simpson. The show usually keeps this fact in the background, as a running joke, as part of the general texture of Springfield's absurdity. Homer's enemy drags it to the front and holds it there under bright lights, and through Grimes's eyes, it stops being absurd. It becomes something that would, in any realistic version of this situation, be a genuine public health emergency. 3 Mile Island is a real place. Chernobyl is a real place. Both of those disasters involved human error at nuclear facilities. The show knows this. TV Tropes, in its analysis of the episode, mentions both of them directly in the context of what Grimes is actually pointing at when he objects to Homer's presence in that building. And yet the show cannot let Grimes win, because if Grimes wins, Homer has to go. And if Homer has to go, the show ends. So Grimes dies. He dies mocking Homer, and is buried while Homer sleeps. And the audience, trained across 8 seasons to love Homer, is intended to feel relieved that Homer is still standing at the end. Weinstein said so directly. The show rooted for the outcome it needed, rather than the outcome that was fair. This is what Homer's enemy actually proves about the Simpson family. It proves that their comfort, their survival, their continued presence in that house on Evergreen Terrace requires a universe that bends in their favor at the expense of people who play by different rules. Frank Grimes played by the rules. He worked hard, he earned things. He tried to hold Homer accountable through legitimate frustration. The universe of The Simpsons could not accommodate both Frank Grimes and Homer Simpson in the same space. One of them had to go. The show chose Homer every time, and it knew what it was choosing. The Simpson family is not made up of bad people. The show has always been clear about this. Homer loves his family. Marge holds everything together through genuine devotion. Bart and Lisa and Maggie are children who did not ask for the circumstances circumstances they were born into. None of them are villains. But their existence, in the form the show gives it to them, carries a cost. It costs Frank Grimes his sanity and his life. It costs Bart a normal childhood. It costs Lisa a community that can actually hold her. It costs Marge the parts of herself she keeps packing away to keep the household running. The show cannot address these costs fully without stopping being the show. So it addresses them sideways. It lets a character like Frank Grimes walk in, say the true thing out loud, die for saying it, and then gets the audience to laugh at his funeral while his coffin goes into the ground. It is one of the most precise and honest pieces of dark comedy ever put inside a primetime cartoon, and almost nobody who watched it in 1997 was supposed to walk away thinking about it the way Frank Grimes would have wanted them to. He said the true thing. The universe destroyed him for it. The Simpson family kept their house, kept their lobster dinners, kept their unearned and thoroughly loved life. And Homer slept through the ending, the way he sleeps through most things that would require him to reckon with what he actually is. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The family does not only carry its damage inward, it passes things down, and the weight of what gets passed down lands differently on each child. Bart absorbs the physical, Lisa absorbs the neglect, but the full weight of what happens when damage travels across generations in this family, when a grandmother abandons a father who neglects a son who cannot explain why he is the way he is, belongs to a part of the story the show tells in quieter moments, in the gaps between the jokes, in the way 3 generations of Simpson men have looked at each other across tables and said almost nothing of what actually needed to be said. Section 6. Marge Simpson is slowly disappearing. There is a version of Marge Simpson that the show almost never shows you directly, but keeps gesturing toward from a distance. The way you gesture toward something you are not quite ready to look at. It is the version of Marge that exists underneath the pearls and the blue hair and the warm voice and the patient smile. The version that has ambitions. The version that gets lonely. The version that has been packing pieces of herself into a box for so long that she has started to forget what the pieces looked like before she put them away. The show does not hide this. It is not a secret buried in background details or hinted at in throwaway lines. It is right there, in multiple episodes, across multiple seasons, stated plainly and then quietly set aside before the next episode resets everything and Marge is back at the stove, back at the window, back in the house on Evergreen Terrace where she has always been and where she will always be. The resetting is the point. That is what the show is actually telling you about Marge. Not that she tried and failed, not that she had dreams and lost them in some dramatic moment, but that she tries and almost gets somewhere, and then the episode ends, and when the next one begins, she is exactly where she started, over and over, for 35 years. That is not a story about a woman who could not make it. That is a story about a system that keeps returning her to the same position, regardless of what she does between episodes. Start with what the show tells you Marge is actually capable of. She is a gifted painter. The season 7 episode, Brush with Greatness, establishes this clearly. Marge takes a painting class, produces work that is genuinely good, and is recognized for it. The episode builds toward a real moment of creative achievement for her. It is treated as a success story, and then it is done. And Marge the painter does not carry forward in any meaningful way into the seasons that follow, because the show needs Marge back in her lane before the next story can start. She becomes a police officer. She works in real estate. She gets a job at the nuclear plant. She opens a pretzel business. She works as a bodyguard. Each of these is its own episode, sometimes two. Each one shows Marge stepping out of the house and into a version of her life where she is doing something other than managing everyone else's chaos. And each one ends. The pretzel business fails or gets complicated. The police job creates problems at home. The real estate work puts pressure on the family. The show always finds a reason to bring her back to the position she started in, and the reason always has to do with the needs of the people around her rather than with anything Marge herself decided. The academic analysis of Marge's psychology describes her as a woman whose entire role in the family is to suppress her own needs and desires in order to keep the household stable. It describes her as carrying the emotional labor of the entire family, which means she absorbs everyone else's pain and difficulty and converts it into functional daily life. And she does this continuously, without being asked and without being thanked, and without anyone fully registering what it costs her. That is not an unusual role for a woman in a family like The Simpsons. It is a very common one. What makes Marge's version of it specific and worth examining is that the show keeps showing you the cost and then asking you to accept the reset as though the cost was not just paid. Her anxiety runs through almost every season of the show. It is not occasional or situational. It is the background noise of Marge's life, the constant low-level hum of a person who is responsible for holding everything together and who knows, at some level, that the thing she is holding together is not entirely holdable. She worries about Homer. She worries about the children. She worries about money, about the house, about what the neighbors think, about whether everyone is okay. The worrying is not a character quirk. It is what happens to a person who has taken on the job of being responsible for outcomes she cannot fully control. And then there is the episode that gets to the bottom of all of this more directly than almost anything else the show has produced about Marge. It is Moaning Lisa, the same season 1 episode that established Lisa's depression. Because Moaning Lisa is not only Lisa's episode, it is also Marge's. The advice Marge gives Lisa in that episode, to push her bad feelings down past her knees and smile and fit in and not let people see what is going on inside, is not advice Marge invented. It is advice Marge was given. The episode shows you this. It shows you a flashback of Marge as a little girl being told by her own mother to make sure she is smiling before she goes outside. The generational handoff is explicit. Marge's mother gave her a tool for surviving a world that does not want to hear about your real feelings, and Marge used that tool every day of her life. And when her daughter needed help, the first thing Marge reached for was that same tool, because it was the only one she had. When Marge watches Lisa fake smiling through mockery on the school grounds, she is not just watching her daughter, she is watching herself. She is watching what she looks like from the outside when she does the things she has always done. And the recognition is bad enough that she turns the car around and takes it back. She tells Lisa to be herself. She tells her it is okay to be sad. She gives her daughter the thing she was never given, which is permission to feel what she actually feels. It is a genuinely moving moment. And then the episode ends, and Marge goes back to managing everyone. And the tool she identified as damaging is still the one she uses on herself every single day for the rest of the series. Homer's role in all of this is large, and the show is not completely honest about it, which is itself worth noting. Homer is not cruel to Marge. He is not an abusive husband in the way that word is usually used, but he is, consistently, documentably, aloof in ways that cost her. When Marge has a moment in the spotlight, Homer drops the parenting. When Marge tries to reason with him, his attention drifts. When the family faces a crisis, Marge solves it, and Homer is the crisis. The show plays Homer's obliviousness as endearing and funny. The person on the receiving end of that obliviousness for 35 years is Marge, and the show, if you watch it with that in mind, occasionally lets you see what it looks like from her side. There is a recurring pattern across the show where Homer's choices about money directly damage the family's stability, and Marge absorbs the consequences. He makes get-rich-quick quick decisions without consulting her. He spends money the family does not have. He pursues schemes that fail and leave the family worse off than before. In one possible future episode, Homer blows the family savings on an underwater house, and Marge eventually leaves because of it. That is a flash forward, not a confirmed outcome, but it is the show pointing at a logical endpoint of a pattern that has been running since season 1. The Simpsons, in the early seasons, portrays Marge as the emotional core of the family. She is the person everyone comes back to. She is the standard the family is measured against. Homer can do almost anything, and the episode resolves when Marge forgives him or helps him fix it. Bart can do almost anything, and Marge is the one who sets the limit. Lisa's pain is most visible to Marge. Maggie's needs go through Marge. The entire family runs on Marge the way a building runs on its foundation. Nobody looks at the foundation. Nobody thanks the foundation. The foundation just holds everything up and does not get to be anything else. What makes this tragic rather than simply unfair is that Marge chose this. Not in a single moment, not with full information, but through a series of choices that each made sense at the time and that together added up to a life shaped almost entirely around other people's needs. She loves Homer. The show makes this clear, and it is genuine. She loves her children. She chose to stay. She keeps choosing to stay. There is real meaning in that, and the show respects it. But love and meaning do not cancel the other thing. They coexist with it, the same way they coexist in Homer's relationship with his children. You can love something completely and still be diminished by the shape it requires you to hold. Marge holds a shape that was decided mostly by other people, and she holds it so consistently and so well that it has become invisible to Homer, to the kids. Sometimes you get the sense to herself. The show gave Marge an episode in season 7 called A Fish Called Selma, and another called Scenes from the Class Struggle in Springfield, and another called Marge on the Lam. And in each one, there is a version of Marge who is alive in a different way than the version who stands at the stove. Not better necessarily, just more herself, more present to her own life. And in each one, the episode ends and she returns to the position the show requires her to hold, and the briefly more alive Marge folds back into the foundation. She is not disappearing dramatically. It is not sudden. That is the specific nature of what is happening to her. It is slow. It is the kind of slow that is easy to miss if you are watching episode by episode and not across the whole run. But across the whole run, if you watch Marge carefully, you can see it. The pieces going into the box. The smile that is sometimes genuine and sometimes is the smile her mother taught her. The woman who could paint and did once, and then mostly stopped. The ambitions that were real and that the format kept returning to zero. The show knows this is happening. It points at it often enough that the pointing cannot be accidental. It just cannot stop it, because stopping it would require changing what Marge is to the show. And what she is to the show is the thing that holds the Simpson family together. Remove the foundation and the building falls, so the foundation stays. And the woman inside the foundation keeps disappearing, slowly, one episode at a time, in a house that could not exist without her. __quote _5 ___. What the show has never fully answered is what the Simpson family would look like if you traced all of this back to its source. Not just Homer's damage, and Bart's, and Lisa's, and Marge's, but the generation that came before. Because the damage that runs through Homer was given to him by a man who received it from his own father before him. And that man, Grandpa Simpson, is sitting in a retirement home that Homer put him in, surrounded by people nobody visits, being mostly ignored by the family his choices helped shape. Section 7, the 3-generation abandonment chain. There is a sign outside the Springfield retirement castle. It reads, "Thank you for not discussing the outside world." That sign is played as a joke. A dark one, but a joke. It is the kind of detail The Simpsons drops into the background and trusts you to notice on your own. But if you stop on it for a moment, if you let it sit rather than moving past it with the episode, it stops being funny fairly quickly. It is a sign telling elderly people, most of whom did not choose to be there, that the world they came from is not a permitted topic of conversation inside the place they have been sent to finish their lives. It is a sign that says, what happened to you before this does not matter here. You are here now. Stay here. Be quiet about the rest. Abraham Simpson lives behind that sign. Homer put him there. This is where the story of the Simpson family gets the most uncomfortable, because this is where it stops being about one person's damage and starts being about what happens when damage travels. When it moves from one generation to the next, changing shape slightly each time, but carrying the same essential weight. When the person who was hurt becomes the person who hurts, not out of cruelty, not out of intention, but out of the simple and terrible fact that you can only give what you were given, and you can only protect your children from the things you know to look for. The Simpson family has been passing something down for at least 3 generations. The show documents this clearly enough that the chain is not a theory. It is built into the biography of each character. Start at the top. The show establishes, in the episode A Father's Watch, that Grandpa's own father, a man referred to as Old Tut Simpson, had a habit of strangling his son for being a disappointment. This is the earliest point in the chain the show gives us access to. Old Tut strangled Abe. The specific form of that violence then traveled forward in time, changed hands, and became the thing Abe did to Homer with words instead of hands. Abe told Homer he was dumb as a mule and twice as ugly. He told him a stranger's ride was worth taking. He called his son's birth an accident. The physical grip became verbal diminishment, but the underlying content, a parent whose frustration and disappointment finds its way onto the body or the spirit of the child in front of them, did not change. Then it moved again. Homer's hands on Bart's throat are the third iteration of something that started with Old Tut and came through Abe. The method has changed again. Old Tut used his hands. Abe used words. Homer uses his hands again, but in a different context, with a different frequency, and with a love for his son mixed in that Abe did not visibly provide for Homer. The violence is real, but it is not all there is. That mix, the love and the harm existing in the same person and directed at the same child, is itself something Homer inherited. Abe occasionally showed something approaching warmth toward Homer in the same episodes where he was most cutting. The warmth and the damage came from the same source. Homer learned that pairing. He replicates it with Bart. But the physical chain is only one part of what the show documents. The other part, and in some ways the harder one to look at, is abandonment. Abe abandoned Homer emotionally throughout his childhood. This is established across multiple episodes. He was strict. He was controlling. He was distant in the specific way of a man who does not know how to be present with a child and substitutes discipline and criticism for the closeness he cannot provide. The academic description of Abe's parenting, drawn from the show's own character documentation, is that he was neglectful and at times emotionally abusive, and that this treatment is a direct reason why Homer is the way he is and why Homer parents the way he parents. Then there is the other abandonment, the one with a name and a timeline and a specific lie attached to it. Mona Simpson, Homer's mother, left when Homer was young. She did not die. She went on the run after participating in the destruction of a germ warfare laboratory owned by Mr. Burns. She became a fugitive. She had, by her own account in the season 7 episode Mother Simpson, no choice. Staying would have meant arrest. She left to protect herself and, as she saw it, to give Homer and Abe a better life without the chaos of a wanted criminal in the house. Abe's response to this was to tell Homer, when Homer was around 9 years old, that his mother had died at the movies. Not that she was gone, not that things were complicated, and he would explain when Homer was older, dead, at the movies. A clean, final, unambiguous lie that closed the door on any possibility of Homer understanding what actually happened or holding on to hope that she might come back. What that lie produced in Homer was not grief exactly. It was something quieter and more damaging. Homer grew up believing that his mother was gone, and that the reason she was gone was somehow connected to him. When he finally discovers the truth in Mother Simpson, when he stands in the cemetery and the woman he thought was dead turns out to be alive, his first reaction is to assume he was to blame for her leaving. He looks at the evidence that she chose to disappear and concludes that he must have been so terrible a son that she could not bear to stay. That is what the lie produced. Not just the absence of his mother, but the internalized belief that he was the reason for the absence. A child who grows up believing he was not worth staying for carries that belief into everything. Into his relationship with his own children, into the way he moves through the world with a kind of oblivious cheerfulness that looks like contentment from the outside and functions, on closer inspection, as a very effective way of not examining anything too deeply. If you stop and look at your life carefully, you might find the thing you have always suspected about yourself. Better not to stop and look. The care packages make this more painful, not less. When Homer and Mona go to the post office in Mother Simpson and the clerk produces a mailbag full of undelivered letters, all the packages Mona sent over the decades that never arrived because Homer forgot to tip the letter carrier at Christmas, the moment is played with dark comedy around the edges, but the center of it is not funny. His mother was trying to reach him. She sent something every week he never knew. He spent all those years believing he was not worth contacting, and she was contacting him constantly. And the gap between those two realities is not something a single reunion at a cemetery can close. The season 19 episode where Mona dies is the end of the chain's forward motion for Homer, and it is the cruelest ending available. Homer's last words to his mother before she passes away are angry ones. She had used him, brought him into a scheme against Mr. Burns without telling him the full truth of what she was doing. He was furious. He told her to leave. She died alone in front of the fireplace, and Homer found her there, and the thing he had to carry after that was the knowledge that he ran out of time to say anything different. The episode after her death is built around Homer trying to make peace with a door that is now permanently closed. He cannot apologize. He cannot repair the last thing he said. He spends the episode polishing her urn and crying and drinking, which is what Homer does with feelings he cannot process through any other channel. Now look at what Homer passes to his own children. He does not abandon them physically. He is there. He keeps showing up, which is itself a meaningful difference from what Abe gave him. But the emotional distance that Abe modeled, the ceiling on presence, the difficulty of sitting in genuine connection without deflecting into humor or food or distraction, is visible in Homer's parenting across the full run of the show. He talks down to his children. He misses what they are actually good at. He is capable of genuine love and simultaneously incapable of the kind of steady, attentive presence that would let that love do its full work. Bart grows up in a house where attention arrives either as strangulation or as those specific warm moments when Homer and his son are briefly, genuinely connected over something small. The unpredictability of which one is coming is its own kind of damage. A child who does not know whether the parent is going to grab them or hug them learns to manage that uncertainty by staying in motion, by acting out, by keeping enough chaos going that the uncertainty is never allowed to settle into the specific dread of waiting for it. Lisa grows up in a house where she is loved but not understood, which the show has always been clear about. Homer tries with Lisa and falls short, not because he does not care, but because the gap between who she is and what he can offer is too wide to bridge with goodwill alone. She needed what Mr. Bergstrom gave her for one episode. Homer cannot give that. It is not in him. He can give her lobster at dinner and a hug when she cries and a father father who shows up to her recital even when he does not want to be there. What he cannot give her is someone who meets her where she lives. She grows up understanding this. Children always understand this, even when they cannot say it out loud. And Maggie watches all of it from her stroller, from her spot on the floor, from the car seat where she sits in silence while everything happens around her. The show's academic analysis notes that Maggie is, based on what the series documents about her personality and environment, at a high risk for the same patterns that have run through this family for generations. She has witnessed more than any of them know. She has absorbed more than any of them have bothered to wonder about. She shot Mr. Burns. She is a baby. These two facts coexist in the show's universe without anyone fully sitting with what they mean together. The chain is not broken at any point in the show's run. Abe is in the retirement home. Homer is in the house. Bart is acting out. Lisa is managing. Maggie is watching. Each of them carrying a version of something that started before any of them were born, passed hand to hand down the Simpson line with a kind of terrible reliability. The show cannot fix this. It cannot fix it because fixing it would mean changing what these characters are, and what they are is the show. But it sees it, it documents it, it builds it into the bones of the family portrait it has been painting since 1989. And the portrait, if you have been watching long enough to see the whole thing, is not of a bumbling, lovable family who keeps stumbling through life and landing okay. It is of a family doing the best they can with damage they did not choose, passing it forward in shapes they do not fully recognize, in a house that looks from the outside like a normal yellow house on a normal street in a town called Springfield. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Bart absorbs the physical part of this chain. He acts it out. He makes it visible. But there is a version of this story that the show has been telling quietly, underneath all the louder ones, about what all of this looks like from the inside of a child who has no words for it yet. A child who is 10 years old and has already been to a facility for children with serious behavioral problems, and who came home from that facility to the same house, the same parents, and the same dynamic that sent him there in the first place. Section 8. Bart Simpson's behavior is a psychiatric portrait, not a punchline. There is an episode of The Simpsons where Homer and Marge give their 10-year-old son a sociopath test. Not as a joke setup, not as the premise of a wacky Springfield adventure, as a genuine parental response to genuine concern about whether their child is capable of feeling empathy toward other human beings. They sit down, they administer the test, they get results that worry them enough that they send Bart to a facility for children with serious behavioral problems. This happens in the show. It is canon. It is part of the documented history of the Simpson family, and almost nobody talks about it when they talk about Bart Simpson, because the show surrounds it with enough other material that it is easy to absorb and move past without registering what just happened. What just happened is that two parents looked at their child and could not rule out the possibility that something was fundamentally broken in him, and then they sent him somewhere, and he came back, and the house was exactly the same as it was before he left. Bart Simpson is one of the most recognizable cartoon characters ever created. His face has been on t-shirts, lunchboxes, and posters since 1990. His catchphrases are known by people who have never sat down and watched a full episode of the show. He is, in the popular understanding of The Simpsons, the funny one, the troublemaker, the kid with the slingshot and the skateboard, and the cheerful disregard for authority. He writes lines on the chalkboard at the beginning of every episode as punishment for whatever he did last time. And then he does something new, and the cycle continues. And it is funny, and everyone moves on. That is one true version of Bart Simpson. It is the version the show leads with. It is the version on the merchandise. The other version is documented just as carefully across the same episodes in the same series by the same writers. It is the version that the sociopath test points toward, the version that the kindergarten teacher created, the version that drank whiskey at 10 years old in the Simpsons movie to deal with emotional pain, the version that an entire town cheered for when he was driven to attempt suicide over a baseball game. That version is not a separate character. It is the same character seen from a different angle, and the show has been building that angle since the very beginning. Start with what happened before the show started. The episode Lisa's Sax in Season 9 goes back to Bart's early childhood to show you the moment the show considers the origin point of who he became. Bart goes to kindergarten. He has a teacher. That teacher looks at this small child and makes a decision, early and firm, about what he is and what he is worth. She belittles him. She attacks him verbally in front of his classmates. She communicates to him through consistent and targeted cruelty that he is not someone worth teaching. He is a problem to be managed, a disruption to be suppressed, not a child to be educated. The show establishes this as the reason, not the only reason, because the house he goes home to every day has its own contributions to make, but the specific origin of Bart's trajectory through Springfield Elementary and through the world beyond it. A teacher whose job was to introduce a small child to the idea that learning was safe and that he was welcome in a classroom, instead introduced him to the idea that he was already defined, already judged, and that the definition was not flattering. Children who are told early and often what they are tend to become that thing. Not because they are weak or because they chose it, because children need mirrors, and if the mirror they are given shows them something damaged and unwelcome, they build themselves around that reflection. Bart built himself around the reflection his kindergarten teacher gave him. He became the problem. He leaned into the disruption. He made the troublemaker identity his own because it was the only identity on offer that had any power in it. Being the worst at the expected thing on purpose is a way of not failing at it accidentally. Bart is never going to be the best student. He decided early that he was going to be the best at being the worst student instead. Academic psychology analysis of Bart's character, which has been done seriously by multiple researchers using the show's documented episodes as source material, identifies his behaviors as consistent with several overlapping conditions. The attention difficulties are real and visible across episodes. The consistent rule-breaking, the arguments with adults, the deliberate annoyance of authority figures are all present and documented. There is also, the analysis notes, a specific skill visible in Bart that complicates a simple reading of him as just a kid who cannot focus. He is capable of organizing complex operations when they interest him. He has led groups of children in coordinated schemes that required planning, social intelligence, and follow-through. He learned portions of the Talmud specifically to help his hero Krusty the Clown reconnect with his estranged father, Rabbi Krustovsky. The intelligence is real. It is just pointed in directions the school system has no way to recognize or reward. The show also documents Bart as a polyglot. He speaks French, Japanese, Cantonese, Vietnamese, and Latin across various episodes. Each language appears in an episode where Bart has ended up in a genuinely dangerous or extreme situation. He learned French while living with abusive winemakers in France who were giving him antifreeze-laced wine. He speaks Cantonese from an episode where he ended up working as a courier in China. He learned Japanese from being thrown in jail in Japan with Homer after they caused a scene at a sumo match. These are the circumstances in which Bart picks up languages, not classrooms, crisis situations. The ability to absorb a new language under pressure while in danger without adult protection is not a sign of a broken child. It is a sign of a deeply adaptive one. But the thing he is adapting to should not be happening to a 10-year-old. The relationship between Bart and Homer sits at the center of all of this. The strangling is the most visible piece of it, but there is something underneath the strangling that the show documents across many episodes and that matters more than the physical gag. Homer and Bart are, in some episodes, genuinely close. They bond over pranks and shared adventures and a mutual appreciation for the kind of humor that Marge tolerates rather than enjoys. There are real moments of warmth between them. The show earns those moments. They are not fake. But Homer also, consistently and across the full run of the show, fails to see Bart. Not the troublemaker version, not the version Springfield Elementary has decided he is. The actual Bart. The one who wrote a play at age 10 in the style of classic British stage comedy when he was stuck inside with a broken leg. The one who memorized portions of a religious text out of devotion to someone he cared about. The one who, in a facility for children with behavioral problems, said quietly and plainly that he truly did not want to hurt anyone. That last moment is the one the show handles most carefully. When Bart is at the facility and he says this, he says it without the armor he normally wears, without the catchphrase and the grin and the performed indifference that he uses in every other situation where something real is happening. He just says it. He truly does not want to hurt people. He does not know why he keeps doing the things he does. He knows there is a gap between what he intends and what he produces, and the gap frightens him, and the show lets him say so in a room where someone is positioned to hear it. And then he goes home. In the Simpsons movie, Bart is at one of the low points the show gives him. He is dealing with the specific pain of feeling invisible to Homer, while watching Flanders next door offer him the steady, attentive, structurally reliable presence that Homer cannot manage. Bart pulls a mini bottle of whiskey from somewhere and drinks the whole thing. He is 10. He does it the way people do when they are drowning in a feeling they do not have any other tool for. He does it, the show makes clear, because it is what he has watched the adults around him do when the feelings get too large. He learned it by watching. Children always learn by watching. The episode where an entire town abuses Bart over a baseball game is season 23. It is extreme enough that it functions as the show holding a mirror up to everything it has been doing to Bart for 23 seasons in a compressed and exaggerated form. Springfield decides Bart is responsible for the team's loss. The town turns on him. They mock him in the streets. They follow him. When his pain becomes severe enough that he is driven towards suicide, the town does not stop. They cheer. When he falls into a coma, they keep mocking him. It takes Marge standing up in front of the entire community and shaming them with the full force of her anger to make it stop. The town does not do this because it is made up of unusually cruel people. The town does this because it has always seen Bart as the version his kindergarten teacher established. The problem, the disruption, the kid who deserves what he gets. Springfield has been Bart's kindergarten teacher this whole time, and the baseball game episode just drops the polite distance and shows you what that has always looked like without the cushion of comedy around it. Marge is the person in this family who sees Bart most clearly and fights for him most consistently. She is the one who shames the town. She is the one who pushed back on the kindergarten teacher. She is the one who, in smaller moments across dozens of episodes, advocates for her son in the spaces between the bigger stories. But Marge cannot be everywhere, and Marge cannot fix the house itself. And the house itself is the original source of a significant portion of what Bart is carrying. She loves him completely, and she cannot fully protect him from the environment her own life has required her to build and maintain. What the sociopath test really tells you, underneath the episode it appears in, is something about the Simpson family's relationship with the truth about its own children. Homer and Marge do not give Bart a sociopath test because they are bad parents. They give it to him because they have reached a point where they genuinely do not know what is going on inside their son, and the test is the only tool they can think of to find out. They have been living alongside his behavior for 10 years, and they still do not fully know him. That gap between the parents and the child, between the love that is genuinely there and the understanding that is genuinely missing, is the gap that everything in Bart's story falls into. He is not a sociopath. The facility confirms this in the only moment where Bart speaks without armor. He does not want to hurt anyone. He is a child who was hurt early, who built defenses around the hurt that look from the outside like defiance and chaos, who has been given a label by his school and his town and the broader culture that is easier to live with than the actual story. The actual story is harder. It requires you to look at what the kindergarten teacher did, at what the house provided, at what the town has always assumed, at what the test revealed about how little his own parents understood about who he actually was inside the performance. Bart has been playing a character since kindergarten. The character is very good. The character has been on merchandise for 35 years. The character is not who Bart Simpson is. The show has known the difference the entire time. It just usually lets the character do the work because the character is funnier, and because looking at what is underneath the character requires sitting with something that is not funny at all. Something that has been quietly sitting in the background of this family portrait this whole time, watching everything, taking everything in, not yet old enough to have built any kind of defense around it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Maggie has been in that house since she was born. She has not said a word, and the show, when it bothers to look closely at what the baby is actually doing while everyone else is busy with the louder stories, shows you something that does not quite fit the image of a cheerful infant sitting in a sunbeam on the living room floor. Section 9. Grandpa Simpson was discarded, and the show knows it. The Springfield Retirement Castle has a sign out front that thanks visitors for not discussing the outside world. That sign appeared in Section 7 of this essay as a piece of dark background detail. It is worth returning to here because this section is specifically about the man who lives behind it. And because the sign, the more you think about it, is not just a joke about a retirement home. It is a description of what happens to people when their usefulness to the people around them runs out. You are here now. The world you came from is not a permitted topic. Stay in your room. Wait. Abraham Simpson was put in that home by his son. Homer placed him there as soon as he could. The show is straightforward about this. It is not a secret or a background detail. It is stated plainly across multiple episodes. Abe is in the retirement home because Homer put him there, and Homer put him there because the alternative, which was having his father in the house, was a thing Homer was not willing to do. This would be a simple story about a neglectful son if the show did not also give you the fuller picture. Because Abe Simpson sold his own house to give Homer the money for a mortgage, he gave up the place he lived to help his son buy the place Homer lives. And then Homer, once the house was secured, put his father in the retirement castle. The transaction is not stated as a dramatic betrayal in the show. It is just documented. The house Abe no longer has is, in a very concrete sense, the house Homer lives in. The walls Homer comes home to every night were partly paid for by the man sitting behind that sign. The show finds this funny. It also finds it sad. Both things are true at the same time, which is the specific register the show operates in when it is being most honest. Abe's life, as the show documents it across flashback episodes and his own rambling stories, was genuinely large before the retirement castle. He served in World War II. He was a farmer after the war, working land with his son until the bank took it. He held a variety of jobs across his adult years, none of them glamorous, all of them real. He raised Homer alone after Mona disappeared. He did this without resources, without a partner, and while carrying whatever damage his own father, Old Tut, had built into him through the strangling and the disappointment and the expectations no child could meet. He was not a good father to Homer. The show is clear about this, too. The verbal cruelty, the emotional distance, the lie about Mona being dead, the casual comment that Homer was an accident, the advice that a stranger's ride was worth taking, these are all documented. Abe failed Homer in ways that produced real and lasting damage. The neglect was real. The emotional absence was real. But here is where the show does something more complicated than a simple portrait of a bad father. It shows you a man who failed his son and then aged into a version of himself that his son chose not to look at. Abe did not stop existing when Homer stopped paying attention. He kept going. He accumulated more life. He made more mistakes. He loved people and lost them and carried the losses with him into the retirement castle, where he is not supposed to discuss any of it. The women in Abe's life alone are a portrait of a man who kept trying and kept losing. His marriage to Mona collapsed when she went on the run. He was briefly married to Amber, the same woman Homer drunkenly married in Las Vegas, which is a sentence that sounds like a joke and is in fact a documented piece of the Simpson family's history. Amber dies of a drug overdose. That is also documented. Abe is briefly married to Selma Bouvier, Marge's sister, which creates a family dynamic so tangled it barely holds up to examination. He was once romantically connected to Jacqueline Bouvier, Marge's mother, which means at various points he has been linked to both his daughter-in-law's mother and her sister. He eventually marries Rita LaFleur, a jazz recording artist. The show gives him these connections and then mostly sets them aside, the way the show sets aside most things about Abe that would require sustained attention to process. He also has children the family barely acknowledges. Abe fathered a daughter named Abby with a British woman named Edwina while he was stationed in the United Kingdom during World War II. He fathered Herbert Powell with a woman he met at a carnival. Herb appears in Season 2, voiced by Danny DeVito, and the episode around him is one of the more emotionally complete stories the show tells about what Abe's choices produced beyond the main family line. Herb lost everything in his first appearance and rebuilt himself in his second. He is somewhere out there in the show's universe, this half-brother Homer barely knows, this son Abe had and did not raise. Living proof that the damage Abe carried has more than one recipient. None of this gets discussed at the retirement castle. The sign says not to. What Abe actually does at the Springfield retirement castle is tell stories. Long, rambling, often impossible stories that the people around him, including his own family when they visit, treat as the babbling of an old man who has lost his grip on reality. The stories are inconsistent. They contradict each other. They include events that could not have happened the way he describes them, things that are physically impossible or historically wrong. The show uses this as a running source of comedy, Grandpa saying something absurd while everyone else in the room exchanges a look. But some of the stories check out. Some of the details that seem like the confabulation of a senile old man turn out, when the show bothers to verify them, to be real. He was a World War II veteran. He did raise Homer alone. He did have a life before the retirement castle that was complicated and large and full of things that matter. The unreliable storytelling that everyone dismisses is not entirely unreliable. It is the mind of an old man doing what old minds do when they have had a lot of life and no one to tell it to. It mixes and blurs and exaggerates. But the life was real. The relationship between Abe and Homer in their scenes together is one of the more quietly painful dynamics in the show, partly because both of them clearly want something from the other that neither can provide. Abe wants Homer to see him, to acknowledge what he gave up and what he went through and what it cost him to raise a son alone after his wife disappeared. Homer wants, at some level, the father he did not have, the one who was present and warm and not cruel in casual passing ways. Neither of them says any of this directly. The show does not give them that kind of conversation. It gives them comedy instead, the short-tempered son and the rambling old man. And underneath the comedy, if you are watching carefully, is two people sitting across from each other with a full room of unspoken things between them. The episode Grandpa vs. Sexual Inadequacy in Season 6 is the most direct the show gets about this. Abe and Homer argue. Homer brings up everything that was done wrong. Abe brings up everything he sacrificed. Neither of them is entirely right. Neither of them is entirely wrong. The argument does not resolve into a clean lesson. It just burns for a while and then stops, the way those arguments do in real life, leaving both people with the same unresolved weight they brought into the room. Abe is not just a man who failed his son and is now paying for it in a retirement home. He is also a man who was failed himself, who received damage from Old Tut and passed a version of it to Homer, who is now watching Homer pass a version of it to Bart, while sitting in a room where the sign outside asks everyone to please not discuss the world he came from. The chain runs through him. He is both victim and source. The show holds both of those things about him without resolving them into a simpler story, which is one of the more honest things it has ever done. What the retirement castle represents, in the context of everything this essay has been building, is the end point that the show cannot fully look at. If you follow the damage forward, if you trace what Homer received from Abe, and what Abe received from Old Tut, and what Homer is now giving to his own children, the question that eventually surfaces is, where does it end? The show's answer, structurally, is that it does not end. The floating timeline means the chain keeps running. Bart stays 10, Abe stays in the castle, Homer stays in the house, the sign stays outside the door. But the show does give you one honest image of the endpoint, and it is not in the retirement castle. It is in the living room of the house on Evergreen Terrace, in a scene the show built around a motivational poster and a collection of photographs of a baby. And in that image, there is something the show has been working towards since the beginning. Not a solution, not a rescue, something smaller and more real than either of those things. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The last piece of this portrait is the one that holds everything else together. It is not about what went wrong. It is about what stays after everything that went wrong, and what a family looks like when it keeps choosing itself anyway, not because it has been fixed, not because the damage has been addressed and resolved, but because love and damage can live in the same house, have always lived in the same house, and the house is still standing. Section 10. The show has always known it can't save these people. There is a poster on the wall of the Springfield nuclear power plant that reads, "Don't forget, you are here forever." Homer Simpson has worked at that plant for over 35 years. He has seen that poster every single day he has walked through those doors. At some point, he took photographs of his youngest daughter Maggie and placed them over the words, one by one, until the poster no longer said what it said before. It now reads, "Do it for her." The show presents this as one of its most beautiful moments, and it is beautiful. It is genuinely, completely beautiful. Homer covering the reminder of his own trapped life with the face of the child who makes the trap worth living in is the most honest thing this show has ever done about what love actually looks like when it exists inside a life you did not fully choose and cannot fully change. It is not triumphant. It is not a man who found his dream. It is a man who found the thing that makes the absence of his dream survivable. That is a different thing. The show knows it is a different thing. It presents it as beautiful anyway, because it is, and because sometimes that is all there is, and because sometimes that is enough. But the poster is still there underneath the photographs. You are here forever. That did not change. Homer covered it. He did not remove it. This is the final secret of the Simpson family, and it is not a dark one exactly, but it is not a comfortable one either. The show has always known that it cannot save these people. Not Homer, not Marge, not Bart, not Lisa, not Maggie, not Grandpa sitting in the retirement castle behind the sign that asks everyone to stop talking about the world outside. The format will not allow it. The floating timeline will not allow it. The structural requirement that every episode reset to the starting position will not allow it. The Simpson family is locked into the shape they have always been, and the show has been honest about this from the beginning. In the specific and quiet way, it is always honest about the hardest things, which is sideways, underneath the comedy, in the details you have to choose to notice. The children cannot grow up. This is the most visible form of the lock. Bart has been 10 years old for over 35 years. Lisa has been 8. Maggie has been a baby. They have not aged a single day in real time, while the world around the show has changed completely. Children who were Bart's age when the show premiered are now in their 40s. They have grown up and had children of their own. Children who are now the same age those original viewers were when they first watched Bart write lines on a chalkboard. And Bart is still 10, still in the same grade, still in the same house, still under the same ceiling. The show has acknowledged this, not directly, not as a formal statement, but in the specific way it acknowledges uncomfortable truths, which is by putting them in front of you and letting you sit with them without explaining what they mean. Flash-forward episodes exist throughout the show's run, episodes that jump decades into the future and show you adult versions of the Simpson children, adult Bart, adult Lisa, a future where things changed and developed and moved. These futures are always possible in the show's universe. They are always somewhere down the road, separated from the permanent present by an unspecified but very large amount of more Springfield, more Evergreen Terrace, more of the life these children are currently living. The flash forwards give you the destination without giving you the path. And the path is the show. The path is 35 years and counting of the same grades, the same house, the same dynamic, the same damage being held and managed and carried forward by people who cannot age out of it. Lisa cannot leave Springfield because the show cannot let her leave. Every season that passes without her leaving is another year of the trap the essay described in Section 4, the intelligence that can see the cage clearly but cannot find the door. The trap does not ease. It does not get more bearable as time passes. Lisa is always going to be 8 years old and extraordinarily intelligent and surrounded by people who love her without being able to reach her. And the show is always going to document this with more honesty than it is given credit for. And it is never going to be able to offer her a way out, because a way out would be the end of the show. Marge cannot change, because the show needs her to hold the same position. Every episode that ends with her back at the stove, back at the window, back in the house after a brief excursion into a version of herself that was more fully alive, is another small addition to the portrait of a woman disappearing slowly in a house she loves and a life she chose, and a system that keeps returning her to the same coordinates regardless of what she does between resets. Homer cannot grow because growth would require consequences, and the show's structure does not sustain consequences across episodes. He can learn something true in the last 5 minutes of an episode and arrive at the beginning of the next one with no memory of having learned it. The drinking continues. The anger continues. The neglect continues. The love continues alongside all of it, genuine and undiminished. because Homer's love for his family is one of the few things the show treats as truly constant. But love without growth is not a solution. It is a condition, and the condition has been running for 35 years. The season 36 finale made something explicit that the floating timeline had always been preventing. It showed a flash forward of Marge's apparent death. The show gestured, for the first time in its entire run, at the end point the format had always been holding back. Marge dies in the future. She does not die in the show's present. The producers confirmed she is still alive and still part of the series. But the gesture was made. The curtain was pulled back just far enough to show you the shape of what is on the other side, which is the thing the show has always known was there and has always declined to show directly, which is that these people end. That the house on Evergreen Terrace does not run forever, that the woman who holds the whole structure together is mortal, and the structure will not survive her. The show pulled the curtain back and then closed it again. Back to the present, back to Evergreen Terrace. You are here forever. Maggie's story sits at the center of all of this in a way the show handles almost entirely through implication. She is the one who has been in the house the longest in terms of what she has witnessed. She cannot talk. She communicates through pacifier sounds and the occasional significant action. And the most significant action the show has ever given her is shooting Mr. Burns in the season 6 cliffhanger episode, Who Shot Mr. Burns? A baby shot a man. The show played this as a mystery and then a punchline. The academic analysis of the show's characters notes that Maggie, based on what the series documents about her tendencies, is considered at a high risk for the same patterns that have run through this family for generations. She has watched everything. Every argument, every strangling, every time Marge pushed her feelings down past her knees and kept going, every time Homer came home from the plant and reached for a beer instead of a conversation, every time Lisa sat alone with something nobody around her could understand. She has been in the room for all of it, in her stroller, on the floor, in the car seat, taking it in without the ability to process it through language because she does not have language yet. The show does not tell you what Maggie will do with all of that when she finally has the words. It just keeps her in the room, watching. Do it for her. That is the phrase Homer put on the poster. It started as do it for her in the singular, for Maggie specifically, for the baby whose face he placed over the words that told him he was stuck. But taken in the context of everything this essay has covered, taken against the full portrait of this family across 35 years, the phrase expands. Do it for her, for all of them. For Bart, who is 10 years old and carrying more than a 10-year-old should carry. For Lisa, who is 8 years old and has been managing her own sadness since episode 6 of the first season with more resilience than most adults could maintain. For Marge, who holds everything together with no acknowledgement and no reset button of her own. For Grandpa behind his sign. For all the versions of these people who have been running on the same track since 1989 without being able to get off it. The show has always known it cannot save them. It has never pretended otherwise, not in the honest register underneath the comedy, not in the specific dark details it keeps building into the portrait. It cannot break the chain. It cannot let the children grow up. It cannot give Marge the life she packed away in that box. It cannot go back and give Homer a mother who stayed or a father who was kind. What it can do, and what it has been doing since December 17th, 1989, is look. It can keep looking at this family with clear eyes and put down honestly what it sees, underneath the jokes and the yellow skin and the couch gags and all the machinery of a show that has been running longer than most of its viewers have been alive. It can say, these people are damaged and they love each other, and the damage does not cancel the love, and the love does not fix the damage, and they keep showing up for each other inside both of those true things simultaneously. That is not a rescue. It is not a happy ending. It is something more durable than either of those things, which is an honest portrait of what family actually is for most people who have one. Not a place where everything gets resolved, a place where you keep coming back, a house where the poster is still on the wall, and the photographs are still covering it, and Homer is still here, and the words underneath are still true, and the face looking back at him from the photographs is still worth every day of it. The show cannot save these people. It never tried to. It just kept watching them, honestly, for 35 years, and trusted that watching closely enough was itself a form of love. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.